I was asked last March if I would come and sit at a round table talking about child and youth mental health and substance use. And I said, yeah, sure, why not? Like, I kind of figured I'd go in for one meeting. So I went in, pretty much said, this is a waste of time. You guys are doing the same thing that's been happening for years and years in this province, and nothing gets done. Um, this is stupid. And at the end, I said, I hope I'll come back in a year and see that you guys have actually made this work. And they asked me to come back, and I kind of still scratched my head a little bit why. So I did. I came back, and it's definitely fulfilling, and I want to keep doing it.
Yeah.
We see the effects of mental health when it's not well taken care of. So depression, substance use, risky behavior, and so forth. So the idea is to get people the help that they need before it leads to negative consequences.
I have two teenagers, and so although they didn't struggle in, in their own world, a lot of their friends had issues and needed some supports. On a personal level, we've had a lot of other teenagers and youth come and spend extended time at our house and become part of our family. So kids who were headed down paths that probably weren't the best for them, we were able to have them come and stay with us and give them the support. So that's sort of, it wasn't in my original work plan for sure. So it's been a new experience for me to work with it. So it's great. Working with the youth for sure. Seeing us actually be able to make a difference in youth's lives and actually make a difference in bringing the community together to support the youth and the whole project, bringing people to the table that actually have a common goal and actually be doing something with that has been pretty rewarding.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I think it's like I've said earlier, it's working with youth and changing the outcome with them and their families of their lives. It's very satisfying work, especially because a lot of people don't necessarily see the potential within themselves, and when they realize that there's no shame and that there's hope and that they can actually change their outcomes, then sometimes you see the light go on in their eyes and you see their lives change for the better. That's very satisfying.
Definitely connecting with the youth, without a shadow of a doubt. When I can do a presentation at a school and I have 7 or 8 youth, grade 10 through 12 usually, lined up to have a personal conversation with me because something I've said either struck a chord for them or their brother or their best friend or their dad or their mom, and just kind of being able to go in a little bit more detail on a personal level with the youth.
It relies on the system instead on the individual. I think there's a lot of resourcefulness in people, and very, very often with mental health, we're not aware of what the problem is, and we're just desperately looking for a way to feel better. So if you ask, for instance, people who are addicted to, let's say, marijuana or smoking, it's often easy to judge the action that people are doing, but if you ask them, well, how do you feel when you use a substance, they'll often say, well, I feel relieved, I feel included, I feel accepted, and these are not bad things, but we tend to focus on the substance instead of the need of the individual. So I think if we can destigmatize and start looking at the underlying causes of why people do the things they do, including ourselves, we'll make progress.
I think one of the biggest thing is lack of communication between service providers. We have these confidentiality forms that youth have to sign when they go in to access substance use services or access MCFD care or therapy or anything. Each agency has their own confidentiality form, and I think it's a huge drawback when if a youth is really in the midst of addiction and mental health struggles, they're not just going to be accessing services at one location. They're going to be accessing throughout the Lower Mainland even maybe, and to have to repeat your story to so many professionals and I think it's a huge flaw. So a universal confidentiality form, I think, is something that we've really kind of aimed towards, but I think we have a long ways to go with it.
Understanding that not all youth are the same and they don't have the same issues. Trying to fix youth into that mental health box is really hard. So that's the biggest flaw, is people need to look at it differently, and we need to listen to what our youth are saying in order to help support them better. The pace is very slow. Having to wait for funding to be able to actually make a difference in their community is frustrating. To get our political figures on board, to understand that there's real issues in Langley for youth. You'd like to be able to wave the magic wand and there would be services for all youth, and there would be, a safe place for them to go, and there would be people for them to talk to, but that doesn't happen, and it's not going to happen quickly. So that's really frustrating that we can't just make the changes. We have to kind of wait for everybody to come together.
Talking about suicide is probably one of the hardest things. I had and overdoses. I had many people through my journey commit suicide or overdose, intentionally and unintentionally. So anytime that conversation comes up, it definitely strikes a chord personally. So I have to try and remove my personal feelings, and then I go home and have a good cry. But hey, it's natural, and it's what needs to be done to kind of deal with the situation at hand. But I think that's probably the hardest thing is those youth that are suicidal or there was a young person at one of the schools I went to that just overdosed and passed away, and it's like it just affects everybody everyone deals with grief in such a different way. So I think that it's something that I'm still going to be working a long time on to kind of separate those feelings.
Well, we still sit with a very fragmented society in terms of mental health. So there are a lot of institutions, and a lot of them have huge waiting lists. So it's very difficult for people to get access to help. In fact, the problem is so big that I think the answer doesn't lie in more of a system, more doctors, more hospitals, and so forth, but it lies in every one of us becoming more effective at managing our own mental health and helping others around us. So it's really educating society, removing the stigma that mental health is us. It's just another form of health. It's not a sickness or a weirdness, and helping equip people to recognize and manage their own mental health and those around them.
Yeah, I did a lot of wondering why. A lot of like, why was it me that that man killed himself in front of when I was 2 years old? Why am I still suffering from it as a 15-year-old, as an 18-year-old, as a 25-year-old? I'll be 28 on Tuesday, and I still have that dream a lot. So I think for me, that answer of like, why did this happen is put into a little bit more perspective. Like, I'm not really a big believer in faith, and I'm not a big believer in like predetermined destiny. But I have heard from so many people in the last 3 or 4 months, and after you hear something for so long, you kind of start to believe it, that everything in my life has kind of led me to where I am today, to be able to give back to the youth that are really suffering with some of this stuff. So I think it's kind of given me a little bit better of a perspective of, I guess not why it happened, but who I am today is really, the reason I am the person I am today is because of everything that happened in my life. So it's given me a little bit more of an appreciation of life in itself, because like I say, I did not think I'd make it till 19, right? Without a shadow of a doubt. If you would have seen me at 16 years old, you wouldn't have thought I would make it till 19. So I think being able to kind of sit down with a youth that's really struggling and share some of my story, and then that youth is like, wow, and you're still alive? I'm like, yeah, I am still alive. And I kind of get a smile, and they get a smile, and then they get up from that conversation going, well, if you ask anybody, I was a hopeless cause, and so it gives them a bit of hope. You know what I mean? So if that's what my story does, is give some youth that are going through some pretty tough shit some hope, hey, that's a pretty good feeling walking away. Awesome. Well, hopefully you guys got enough in there to. I'm sure the teachers will be like, "What? Who the fuck is this?"